Folks, we're going to get back to one big, beautiful bill in a minute. But I want to talk about political failures keep running California. That's the subject of the riff. Now, look, first and foremost, the nightmare in California is a natural disaster. Nobody can control the Santa Ana winds. My own brother and his wife that live in Hollywood had to evacuate their apartment. Thankfully, the Hollywood fire was contained, and they have returned home. But when it comes to catastrophic fires like this, there are no heroes. Always better to be safe than sorry. Unfortunately, however, there is a good deal of evidence that suggests that the blue state California politicians have, in fact, made the tragedy even worse. Officials failed to properly refill a reservoir, and consequently, there was no water in the fire hydrants of several key neighborhoods. The mayor's office cut the fire department's budget, and in order to preserve an obscure fish called the smelt, or at least they just had their own reasons for cutting the budget, Governor Newsom cut the water flow that never got to Southern California, also in defense of this obscure fish called smelt. Meanwhile, take a listen to President Trump on smelts.
Well, it's very sad because I've been trying to get Gavin Newsom to allow water to come. You'd have tremendous water up there. They sent it out to the Pacific because they're trying to protect a tiny little fish, which is in other areas, by the way, called the smelt. And for the sake of a smelt, they have no water.
All right, again, I want to repeat. This is a tragic nightmare of a natural disaster in California. Lives lost, homes destroyed. And I'm not an expert on all this. But if reservoirs are empty so that water's running off into the Pacific rather than being piped into the hydrants, that's a government mistake of the first order. Should have been changed. People tell me in California that the infrastructure, especially the pipe and water system, especially the pipe and power system, has been neglected for quite some time, in large measure because so much of the money has been flowing to so-called climate projects by the extreme left greenie politicians. So maybe if Governor Newsom and Mayor Bass and others spent more on water and power infrastructure and reservoir management, some of this tragedy in Southern California could have been mitigated. At this point, I'm sure that folks in the LA area are a lot more worried about their safety than they are about the blame game. But it's going to be useful at some point to have a post-mortem and take a careful look at what went wrong and what could be done better to mitigate these natural disasters and protect the good citizens of Los Angeles. There's also a financial angle to this story. Early estimates by one of the big banks on Wall Street suggest perhaps a $50 billion loss, of which $20 billion will be insured losses. California has got a big-time problem on this score, too. Some very large home insurers, like State Farm and Allstate, are pulling out. State Farm, I think, stopped home insurance last spring. Now, I'm no expert here either, but you got to wonder if they were looking at the very same infrastructure problems and assessing the same risks as others have, and that these insurers decided they don't want the risk, blowing up their balance sheet or blowing up their entire company. I mean, they've got shareholders to answer to. And the California state insurance regulators are not going to let the insurance companies charge sufficiently higher premiums to cover the natural disaster risks. Now, yeah, those premiums keep getting higher and higher, but it's the only way that the insurance companies can make a living, unless they pull out altogether. Plus, the California state insurance regulator and their plan called the FAIR Plan is going to take a big hit from the wildfire damages, and they are about to assess private insurance companies an enormous amount, which the private insurers, in many cases, just cannot afford to pay. California is already in a home insurance crisis even before this catastrophe. And this may be the costliest blaze in American history. It's not completely unlike the hurricane disasters you see occasionally in Florida or elsewhere, Louisiana, for example. Certain property values in all these hard-hit areas are going to plunge. even while insurance premiums skyrocket. That's the way the market's going to work. And certainly, again, this is not the exact moment for the citizens of Southern Cal who are worried about their survival a lot more than they're worried about dollars and cents at this juncture. But one reality is surely that the highest tax state in the country can do a lot better in managing its vital pipe and power systems and reservoirs and forests and its insurance system as well than it has done. And I'm going to say what a lot of folks are thinking. You want to really help the people and the businesses in California? If you do, then spend a lot less money for these left-wing climate extremism and a lot more money for basic services and put more money after tax into the wallets of the citizens and their businesses. And that's the riff.